Ever looked at like a chair or a table and wondered how it went from being a tree in the forest to, well, that finished product?
Right, there's a whole journey there.
We're taking a deep dive into the world of wood technology engineering to explore that journey. And let me tell you, it's way more complex and fascinating than it might seem at first glance.
No, absolutely. It was definitely more than meets the eye. We're going way beyond just like classic woodworking, diving into a world of like serious innovation and problem solving with wood as this like high-tech material.
Totally. You've been looking into this as a potential career path and sent over some really in-depth guides and resources from RoleCatcher. What's really stood out to you in terms of what this job actually looks like day to day?
What's really interesting is how many different titles there are for essentially the same role. You see timber engineer, wood scientist. They even had renewable energy engineer in one of the guides, which I thought was interesting.
Wow, yeah. It really highlights how this expertise can apply to so many different industries and fields, huh?
Exactly.
It's not just about knowing your wood types, right? Although I'm sure that is a pretty important part of it. Haha. So what are some of the core things someone in this field actually does?
It's a really unique blend of science, engineering, and even a bit of creativity, which I found really cool.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, you need a deep understanding of wood science, which is like everything from the cellular structure of different species to how wood reacts to stress or humidity.
So it's almost like you're not just picking out the prettiest piece of oak.
Yeah.
You're understanding how that piece will behave under different conditions on a molecular level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got the engineering side of it, applying those principles to design and build stuff, whether it's
Yeah.
furniture, buildings, or even like wholly new materials that are bio-based.
Yeah.
They actually highlighted this junior engineer in one of the RoleCatcher guides who helped design this super eco-friendly plywood, which I thought was a great example of how innovation is happening all the time in this field.
Yeah. That's what I love about this. It's about taking a natural, renewable resource like wood and constantly finding new applications for it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But I imagine it can't be all about technical skills and scientific knowledge, right?
Right.
I mean, you've got to work with teams, clients. There's a human element too.
Oh, for sure. And RoleCatcher really emphasized that soft skills are super important to be a successful wood tech engineer. Like, communication is key, especially when you're explaining complex technical stuff to clients who might not have that same background.
It's kind of like you're bridging that gap between the science of wood and its practical real-world applications. Being able to explain things clearly and simply is crucial.
Absolutely. And it's not just talking at people either. A lot of it is actively listening to what clients need and then figuring out the best solutions based on that.
Makes sense.
And obviously, problem solving is huge in any engineering field. Things don't always or like ever go to plan. So you have to be able to adapt and troubleshoot and just generally be good at finding creative solutions.
Almost like you need to be a wood whisperer. Haha.
Mm.
Not just working with wood, but alongside it, understanding it, finding ways to maximize its potential.
I love that. A wood whisperer. That's perfect. And what makes it even more interesting is that the whole industry itself is evolving so rapidly. Sustainability isn't just a buzzword anymore. It's like a core value driving so much of the innovation that's happening.
It seems like this is a career where you constantly need to be learning to stay ahead of the curve. What does RoleCatcher have to say about that? What are the qualifications and skills that are becoming more and more important for someone in this role?
Yeah, so RoleCatcher talks about these certifications that are becoming like increasingly important. Like there's the Forest Stewardship Council certification, the FSC, and it's all about responsible forestry practices.
Making sure that the wood is being harvested sustainably.
Exactly. And then they also talked about how important it is to understand life cycle assessment or LCA. It's basically analyzing the environmental impact of a product from like start to finish.
So it's not just about the tree itself, but the entire process.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
from growing the tree and harvesting it to turning it into the final product and then like what happens to it at the end of its life.
Wow. So it's about seeing the whole life cycle of that wood, from sustainably sourced forests all the way to minimizing waste during production and even disposal.
Huh.
Kind of reminds me of that saying, the most sustainable product is the one that's already been made. But those certifications you mentioned, like the FSC one,
Yeah.
those are things you can get on top of a degree, right? Like to make yourself stand out even more in the job market.
Exactly. They're like proof that you're not just interested in wood, you're invested in its future. And speaking of the job market, RoleCatcher actually goes pretty deep on how AI is being used in hiring, which can be honestly kind of terrifying.
It really can. It's like you're sending your resume out into the void, and you're just hoping that a real human is on the other side reading it, you know?
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like, how do you even stand out in that sea of application?
Right. Like, what do RoleCatcher have to say about that whole process?
Well, one of the big things they emphasized was tailoring your resume and cover letter to match the specific keywords and skills that the algorithms are looking for.
Makes sense. It's kind of like SEO for your resume, I guess.
Exactly. And the cool thing is their platform actually helps you do that. You can upload your resume and they have these tools that'll analyze it against specific job descriptions to see how well it matches up, like if it's using the right language, highlighting the right skills, that kind of thing.
Wow, that's super useful. It's like having a secret weapon for getting past the gatekeepers and actually getting your resume seen by human eyes.
Totally. And if you're lucky enough to get an interview, they have a ton of resources for that too, like practice questions, tips on what kind of things interviewers are looking for in this field. They even have this AI-powered feedback thing where you can record yourself answering interview questions and it'll like analyze your body language and tone and stuff, which I thought was kind of cool and a little creepy, haha.
AI is wild. Right? Haha. But no, that's amazing, though. It's literally like having a career coach in your pocket, which is super valuable, especially in today's job market.
Mm.
But okay, let's say you ace the interview, you get the job. What does the actual career path look like for a wood technology engineer? Like, where do you go from there?
Right, so RoleCatcher actually breaks it down into pretty distinct stages. You usually start as a junior engineer, working on specific projects under the guidance of more like senior engineers.
Got it. So kind of like an apprenticeship almost.
In a way, yeah. It's a chance to apply everything you learned in school, get that hands-on experience, make some mistakes, learn the ropes.
So like that junior engineer we talked about earlier who worked on the eco plywood, that was probably their first job out of school.
Yeah, totally. And then as you get more experience, you might move into a senior engineer role where you're leading teams, managing bigger projects, maybe even specializing in a particular niche within wood technology. Like some people become experts in sustainable timber framing, others in engineered wood products that are used in skyscrapers.
Wow, so there's a lot of room to grow and find your niche in this field.
Definitely. But like we were saying before, it's important to be a lifelong learner. Like the field's constantly evolving. So even when you're in a senior position, you got to keep learning to stay ahead of the curve.
That's so true. So how do wood tech engineers actually do that? What are the ways they stay on top of those changes? Is it like reading super niche woodworking journals or...
Haha. Well, yeah, staying current on research and new publications is definitely a big part of it. But there are also some really cool, almost futuristic things happening in wood technology that are pushing the boundaries of what's even possible.
Okay, so beyond the journals, what's got you most excited? Like, what are some of the things on the horizon for wood technology that have you, like, really fired up?
Well, for one, 3D printing with wood fibers is becoming a thing.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, they can create these incredibly intricate designs that would be basically impossible to make with traditional woodworking techniques.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm trying to picture that. What kind of designs are we talking about?
I mean, anything you can imagine, really. They can print these like super complex lattices and shapes, and it's strong too.
That's wild. So it's not just about looks, it actually changes what's possible structurally, too.
Exactly. And then there's this whole world of bio-based composites, which is super cool. They're using wood derivatives to create these super strong yet lightweight materials.
Like what? What kind of things could you even use that for?
I mean, eventually they're talking about using it in cars and even airplanes. It's crazy.
A wooden airplane wing. That's kind of blowing my mind right now. Though I guess it's not that different from what they used to do back in the day, just like way more high tech.
Right. Exactly. And even crazier, we're starting to see wood-based nanotechnology, like literally manipulating wood fibers at the molecular level.
Hold on, wood nanotechnology. What does that even mean? What are they doing?
So they're basically breaking down wood fibers into these tiny, tiny particles, and then they can reassemble them in all sorts of ways to create new materials with like totally different properties.
Okay, now that is some next level stuff. It's like we take wood for granted, but it's like we're discovering a whole new world of potential within it. It makes you wonder, with all this cool stuff happening within wood technology itself, what about those other career paths RoleCatcher mentioned, the ones that branch out from this core expertise? Like, what if you get into this field and then you're like, actually, I want to do something a little different, but utilize this knowledge?
Right. It's actually really smart to think that way because a lot of the skills you develop as a wood technology engineer are super transferable.
Hmm.
For example, that whole thing we were talking about with life cycle assessment, understanding sustainable materials and manufacturing processes, well, that's huge in the renewable energy sector.
Oh, totally. It's like the future of everything. You mean like biofuels, that kind of thing?
Biofuels for sure, but think about like wind turbines, those massive blades they have. Those require super strong yet lightweight materials, and more, they're turning to engineered wood products for that.
Oh, wow. So you could go from designing a sustainable piece of plywood to helping build a wind farm. It really opens up a lot of doors, huh? What were some of the other adjacent fields that RoleCatcher talked about?
They mentioned construction management, which makes a lot of
Oh,
sense.
yeah? How so?
Well, as a wood tech engineer, you're not just an expert in wood itself, but also in like the problem solving and client communication skills you need to actually get a project done. And with all the new innovative uses of timber framing and wood-based building techniques we're seeing in architecture, that's super valuable.
So you could go from working with the wood itself to overseeing whole projects that are utilizing it in really cool, cutting-edge ways. I don't know. I feel like this deep dive has really opened my eyes to a whole forest of possibilities. No pun intended. What about you, listener? Are you feeling inspired?
I hope so. Whether you're like super into the science of wood or you love the idea of designing buildings and structures in a more sustainable way, or even if you just think wood nanotechnology is the coolest thing ever, this is definitely a field with tons of potential.
For sure. There's so much room for growth, innovation, and yeah, I think that this is one of those fields where you can really feel like you're making a difference, which is pretty awesome. It's been so fun digging into all of this with you.
Yeah, this was great.
And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a whole new appreciation for wood and maybe even inspired you to see it not just as a material, but as a source of innovation for the future. Who knows, maybe one of you listening will be designing those wooden airplane wings someday. Thanks for joining us.